morning. It is October, and you know what that means, right? Those who have been in church for a long time know that across the country today, churches everywhere are starting their stewardship campaign. Churches everywhere are talking about generosity and giving and money and stepping up in faith. And I'll be honest with you, I hate talking about money. Maybe it's because growing up, you would get that hard sell from the pastor. I don't know. I'm not going to talk about money. I'd rather talk about ministry. See, if you believe in the ministry, everything else follows. So this month, for our stewardship campaign, we are celebrating the ministry of this church. We are celebrating the ministry of the past, the ministry that we are doing now, the ministry that we could do in the future. There's going to be a month of celebration as we talk about all of those servants of God who poured their heart into sharing Jesus' redeeming love with the world. But before we get into any of that, we need to start our celebration off by talking about why. Why are we here? Why do we do any of the things we do? It's because of Jesus, the one who serves us, the one who gave himself for us. See, nothing we do matters unless we do it for him. And so today we are going to celebrate Jesus. And we start by talking about who he is and what he does for us. We start with Peter's confession. Jesus is sitting around with his disciples and he asks, "Who do people say that I am?" And frankly, a lot of people have their opinions about Jesus, and they thought he was this person or that person. And today, still, a lot of people have their opinions about Jesus, thinking he's this or that, or even if he ever really existed. But see, all of our opinions never actually capture the fullness of who he is. But Peter got really close. Peter gets it. Because Jesus says to him, "Who do you say that I am?" And Peter says, "You are the Messiah, the Son of God." Now, Peter doesn't actually fully get what this means. Because when Peter calls him the Messiah or the Christ, he's saying, you are the chosen one of God. You are the Redeemer, the Deliverer, the Liberator that God promised he would save us. But see, in Peter's mind, that's someone to lead them out of the Roman Empire, someone to make them a great nation again. He has no idea about sin or sacrifice or the fullness of what this word Messiah means. But that's okay. He's learning. So are we. He says, "You are the Son of the living God." You have to understand that the emperors of Rome, the Caesars, all the way back to Julius Caesar, they thought they were sons of God. They called themselves sons of God. When Caesar died, they said that he had become a god, and so they worshipped him. And when the emperors died, they became divine, and they were worshipped. But a lot of these emperors didn't want to wait till they died, so they demanded to be treated like gods on earth. And so they would go around calling themselves sons of God. And so what Peter is saying to him, You are the Christ, the Son of the living God. That's a very revolutionary statement. Treasonous, even. Because what he's saying is, all of those Caesars, they're nothing. You are the one with the power and the authority of the divine. That's what he's telling him. Peter recognizes Jesus as being from the one true God. But Peter thinks that this guy is going to lead a revolution against Rome. He's got his sword ready because he's expecting violence. Because, well, that's the ways of the world, right? That's the ways of kings and emperors, to violently conquer. That's how it is in this world, and frankly is still today. So Peter didn't fully get what this meant, and he certainly didn't know that Jesus wasn't going to deliver us, to free us using violence. No, Jesus doesn't use violence. He uses grace. Paul tells us in Ephesians, it's by grace you have been saved, through faith. And this is not of your own doing, it's a gift of God, not the result of works, so that no one would boast. See, Christ doesn't liberate us using violence. In fact, the only violence involved in our deliverance is the violence that Jesus suffered on the cross. And if you think of it, there is no better picture of human sin than that we had God in the flesh with us. And they murdered him because he wasn't what they wanted. And it's not just them, it's us today. Still, it's human beings everywhere. We have that in us that just rejects God, that just pushes him aside, that ignores him, that says, that's not what I want. And it's not only that we do violence against God, we do violence against one another, created in the image of God, in the things that we do, in the words that we say, in the ways that we think. Sin has infected the whole human race. And we don't have to look far in our world to see just how deep that infection goes. And yet, God responds to it with grace. Rich in mercy and full of love, God redeems us. He takes our violence and he uses it against us to show us his saving love. We celebrate Jesus, who is God with us. We celebrate Jesus, who is God in the flesh. We celebrate Jesus, who chose to show us mercy and grace and love, to free us from all of those things that would keep us from knowing the fullness of the love of God. That's what we celebrate. You see, we celebrate that Jesus saves us by grace. And we celebrate by being Jesus' grace for the world. And that's what this church has done for 196 years. People who were called and changed by the love of God and the grace of Christ founded a church on this spot almost 200 years ago so that they could show the people around them so that they themselves could grow together in the love of Christ. See, they didn't just build the church brick by brick. They built it heart by heart, letting people see and know Christ in so many ways. And some of these people's names are lost to history, but others we know so well. Servants of God like Dot Summers, like Gail Pote, like Betty Bell, Bill Thielking, and so many others. So many people whose servant hearts helped build up this church and share the love of Christ. So many who are still here today who keep building on the foundation of Peter's confession and the reality of grace. See, imagine this, almost 200 years of Sunday school classes, almost 200 years of Bible studies, almost 200 years of caring for each other, of caring for the needy in Glassboro. Our stocking party that we do every Christmas is decades old. And it continues to minister to people in need. Over 200 years, people fed this community with potluck dinners, countless casseroles. From a food pantry that got too big for the back office in the fellowship house and became the Samaritan Center in Glassboro. 200 years of women's groups, of men's groups, of youth groups, of support groups. 200 years of raising up disciples and sending many of them into ministry, like our own district superintendent, Glenn Conaway, who grew up in this church and who credits his upbringing for what led him to serve God. See, you and I are here today because of the faithful servants who built upon the foundation of Christ. And they have entrusted to us that ministry to continue building, to continue growing, to continue sharing the love of Christ so that all kinds of people everywhere can see and know Jesus. Because that's who this is all about. It's why we're here. It's why the church is what it is and does what it does. It's why we as individuals are here because of Christ. We may be at different stages in believing in that proclamation. We may be in different stages of accepting or living in that grace, but we are here because of Him. That's what we celebrate today. That everything that we are and will be is because of Jesus. And we come to the communion table because it's a reminder. It's a reminder, it's a calling back to our foundation. To remember who Christ is and who we are because of Him. Communion is a chance for us to remember that. It's a restart for those of us who have fallen away or just forgotten. It's a new start for those who are ready to make that commitment, to believe that confession of Peter's that He is God. And we need His grace. So let us come to this table ready to commit ourselves again to Jesus. and to let Him use us to continue building up His church until He returns and makes all things well. Amen.